Okay, so that's working well. Good morning. So we'll start with Refuge and Bodhichitta prayer. Page 14. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. So I thought that it would be good now to actually spend a bit more time on the Refuge and Bodhichitta prayer, but particularly we've been advised Candrela, who does an observation about the practices for the health and long life of our precious teacher, Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche, has recently, I think those of you who get the e-news might have seen that the advice to recite as much as possible over the next 2 months, the Refuge and Bodhichitta prayer, the general one that we do, for removal of obstacles to the health of our precious Lama, Zopa Rinpoche. And so I thought we could do some of that now. And just keeping in mind that this period, you know, from last Monday, the full moon, up to the full moon in June, on the 14th of June, which is when we celebrate in the Tibetan tradition, Sakadawa, this Vesak period and so forth, that it's a very special time for practice, the whole month. So it's always a special time, but especially at this time. So I thought at least when I'm here, and I have sent a message to the committee people before teachings and within the pujas and so forth, to just spend some time doing, I would do a mala anyway, and then as much as we do, so that we can offer that accumulation to FPMT for our precious guru. And so, but also people can do at home, you know, it's advised, you know, maybe do one mala in the morning, one mala in the evening of the prayer. So I thought we could do, I was experimenting how long it took me to do in Tibetan and how long it took me to do in English. The Tibetan's quicker because if you know it, because there's less syllables. Yeah. So English tends to have a lot more words. Okay. Anyway, so we can recite a few times together, and the formula that we will use is the traditional one. This one we've just said is listening to the Dharma, appropriate to this morning. But here we will I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. So whatever version of that comes out your mouth, that's fine, you know, because it's the sentiment and so forth. But holding Lama Zopa Rinpoche in our hearts, you know, and for his health and as guided by Candrela. Okay. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all transmigratory beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I go for refuge. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. It's a very powerful practice to do as well, in any case. I always wonder if this is all the skillful means of getting us to do certain practices. Well, it is a gift. But by calling the Buddha to mind, then we're also awakening our own Buddha nature and our own virtues and so forth. So thank you. So continue on, and if you want to keep a tally and so forth, and maybe we can accumulate that over the next month or so. All right, so here we are continuing on our presentation of the Lam Rim, the graduated path to enlightenment. So we were talking last time about Lama Atisha's lamp on the path to enlightenment and how that brought together this whole presentation into a very coherent format. And even the title, Lamp on the Path to Enlightenment, resonates with, as Shakyamuni Buddha said to Ananda. Ananda was like his close attendant, was there at all the teachings. It said that when Ananda, the Buddha asked Ananda to be his attendant, the sort of saying goes, oh yes, I've got a few conditions. Ananda said, well, the main one was to be present at all the teachings. And because Ananda also had a, photographic memory, or he remembered all the teachings, when we hear the sutras and it says, thus have I heard at one time, it's Ananda saying, I was with the Buddha and this is what the Buddha said. So it can give you that sense of that powerful lineage. So the Buddha said to Ananda, be a lamp unto yourself. So the sense of don't take the teachings because I said so. Be a lamp unto yourself is sort of like prove it to yourself. The Buddha wasn't having any qualms about that. He understood the truth of reality. There was no qualms about that, but that we each have to check up for ourselves, because we have to also counteract our doubts and so forth, our wrong views and everything like that. So check up. And so, the analogy that is used of the gold, and like you wouldn't take someone's word for it that this is pure gold. You'd melt it. A blacksmith would melt it or rub it or so forth, burn it, and yep, it's pure gold, right? Okay, so like that same sort of analytical process that we engage in. So we were looking at the overall presentation last time, and we're just getting up to we have this map of the three scopes, the three levels of practice, and we said that all of this trajectory, all of this step-by-step path to enlightenment is the practice for one individual on the path, although the Buddha taught also according to the capacity of, Buddha had skillful means to know what individual's particular capacity was, and taught according to their predispositions, their preferences, their capabilities at that point in time. So it's like the perfect teacher, the perfect guide to be able to show you, okay, your personal instructions progressing on the path to enlightenment. So, we start, so Atisha's whole purpose for setting out this subject matter, which is the lamp on the path to enlightenment, so it tells you what it is, relying on all the teachings of Sutra and Tantra that the Buddha gave, because Atisha was able to understand all of those teachings. And the purpose of this, so that we will, come by following step by step to develop those realizations of the subject matter, one subject to the next, to realize each stage of the path to enlightenment, by relying on and practicing each and every one of the stages. So the inner purpose of that, the final purpose, is by relying on that, by practicing all these stages, we will be able to ourselves achieve perfect enlightenment. That's our goal, right? And while we might say, oh, I don't know if I can do that in this lifetime, you know, we'll look at that. But the purpose is so that we realize that, but also to generate, if we have a conviction that it is possible, whether this lifetime or over multiple lifetimes or so forth, that, you know, it will assist us to generate enthusiasm for listening to the teachings, getting the teachings, reflecting on the material, taking it into meditation and so forth. So we, you know, we have to generate that and have a sort of confidence that this is all very coherent and all the bits fit together, you know. Without that, we won't be enthusiastic. We have doubts and so forth. Of course, the Buddha said, you check up, you know, so we still have to use our analytical processes. So just this, it did get distributed to folks, and I appreciate you may not have it at the moment, the 3 scopes. Even before we get to that, there are 2 prerequisites for that before we even engage in, well, what are the meditations on the path to enlightenment? And the 2 of those is relying on a spiritual teacher. So we rely on Shakyamuni Buddha, we rely on Lama Atisha, Lama Tsongkhapa, we rely on, you know, all our precious lamas, you know, Solan Stella Lama, Kebje, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, the Geshes and so forth, unpacking all of these teachings, making it accessible for us, because indeed that's what the Buddha did in the world. So following that example. So the relying on a spiritual teacher, I think I might have mentioned last time, is the next module that comes along. So we won't go into detail around that now, although it is in the presentation of the Lamrim. If you look at Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chenmo, the Great Treatise on the Path to Enlightenment, the first volume, it starts with that of paying homage and to the authenticity of the text and the authenticity of the author. In this case, it was of Lama Atisha and so forth, and the qualities of that teaching and the teacher. So we'll look at those aspects more in the next module. And the other one is appreciating how precious this very human life is that we have right now. And so we look at the different aspects for that. So this is where we got up to last time, was to, I think we got up to just before looking at that. Amazing how your page goes when you're. So if we look at the points about this appreciating our precious human life. So it's said not just being an ordinary individual, an ordinary person, but being a person seeking deeper meaning, seeking more than just the ordinary affairs of this life. So all of us, at whatever level, whatever capacity we have. So we look at the uniqueness of that in terms of, we talk about 8 leisures and 10 endowments or freedoms and opportunities. They're called different things. So the 8 leisures in general is our freedom from being born in other realms of existence within this cycle of existence of samsara, other places we could be born, like an animal who can't, you know, work on their minds really to any great extent. I mean, we all love our little pets and so forth and think they're just the smartest thing on earth, but just check out their intelligence. We have limitless intelligence as human beings. So freedom from being in that situation of being in hell realms, which is not necessarily a place, but a state of hellish state of mind where you're, you know, or freedom of being born in, we say, the hungry ghost realm or predator realm, and that's constant craving, never getting enough. So you could think of, often I think about it in terms of addiction, but even just survival and so forth, you know, of you just like hand to mouth, which you might always say the experience of the animal realm as well. But even being born in higher realms of God realms where everything's going so well for you, you're cruising, that you don't really, a complacency sets in, or they say a bliss sets in, and you don't feel that because you don't experience the level of suffering, or particularly on the basis of the body, that we experience as human beings. So as human beings, it said, then we have the best rebirth. And that is because we know what suffering is. And thank you very much. We know we don't want to have it. But we also know there's a possibility, because otherwise why are we here? To be free of that. There is a possibility to attain happiness that is enduring. And we have some sort of confidence in that, that there is a state of peace. There is a state of, we talk about these things just as ordinary human beings, of contentment, of peace. We all want that. We all crave that. So we see that that's possible. So this makes it very unique. On top of that, we're not, you know, the freedoms is what we're not experiencing. So we're not in a time when the Buddha hasn't appeared. So, you know, Shakyamuni Buddha is the fourth, is it Krakananda? I can't remember all their names now. Previous Buddhas who didn't teach, right? Not only we'd say a Buddha appearing, but a Buddha appearing and teaching, turning the wheel of Dharma. And so this is what we're celebrating this month, the fact that the Buddha took birth, not only took birth, but as a human being to be able to communicate with us as human beings. So we have that. And we're free of being in a place where there is no Dharma, no teaching. So we could, you know, we could sort of go, well, probably in most of the world, there's access to teachings. But even now in Tibet, it's getting more difficult, let alone China, or, you know, let alone, you know, you don't have the internet, you know, or stuff like that. I mean, we've got a lot more opportunity. At the time of the Buddha, everyone had to go to the Buddha to get the teachings. Now it seems the Buddha comes to us, you know, online and in the comfort of your own home, right? Which has been very useful when we've been in lockdown or protecting ourselves health-wise. Also, we're free. It says in the text of being born with defective senses. And people think, is this anti-people with disability? No, it's not saying that. Of course, if animals can get enlightened, people with disabilities can get enlightened, there's no question. But it's, you know, if you think of the time of the Buddha, where if you didn't have the faculty of hearing, you couldn't hear the teachings. If you didn't have the faculty of sight, you couldn't see the Buddha. Okay, that might still pervade, but you can hear the teachings through all the different technologies and so forth. So it's a lot better these days. Or if you couldn't walk, you couldn't get to the teachings. Again, it's not necessary these days, is it? You know, so we do have, we could say we have even better conditions right now. And this is probably the most important one, freedom from holding wrong views, the dismissive views of perhaps of any spiritual path, really, of saying, no, there's only this life and you just got to work harder, be more successful, you know, make the most of this life and that's it. You know, and that view does exist in the world. We might even know people who hold those views. So we're free of all of that because we're here. So then the endowments come as a reflection of that, of being born human. Being born, generally, sometimes it was translated as a central land somewhere like India where the Buddha taught. But we can say where there is the Dharma, the teachings of Buddha are accessible. So that sort of idea of, well, you have to be in India or Tibet or Asia or so forth is redundant these days, you know, just where the Dharma is accessible. And being born in, it is called, you know, sometimes we say, oh, this is an eon of destruction as we see the imbalance of the elements. We see that, but it's also called a fortunate eon because it's an eon in which the Buddha taught. So we have a karmic connection specifically with Shakyamuni Buddha, you know, specifically that Buddha. And of course, we have all the different aspects arising, Manjushrya's wisdom and Tara's swift energy and so forth and so forth. But it's on the basis of the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha that we have that strong karmic connection with, which is wonderful. And where the Dharma flourishes, you know, and again, I can think about that myself in terms of much broader aspect of any spiritual path, because the Buddha said, you know, there's 84,000 paths to enlightenment. I can't name them all. But given the Buddha taught according to the predisposition, we have a freedom. Look at Australia, we have a freedom to practice whatever religion, faith, spirituality, or none. You know, we have that freedom. You know, in I think the last census or the one before, I'm losing, because the last census, have we got the results of that? It was so boring.
Yeah, the results were boring too.
The results were boring too. But the previous one was saying that people, younger people, identified not with a particular religion or faith, or we say organized religion or recognized religion, but with a sense of spirituality, but more individual sense of spirituality. So we have that, right? So this is all the conditions that we have on a personal level, well-functioning body and mind, so we can hear the teachings, get to the teachings, or so forth. And again, as we said about disability, that's not necessarily a hindrance, but we're well enough. Even, you know, I've known many people engage with the Dharma from their bed over the many, many years, and still know people like that. And so well enough, functioning well enough to engage with the Dharma. And then it's very interesting, not having committed any of the 5 heinous crimes, now which are said to be immediate retribution, which means without the break of another intervening lifetime, that you will be reborn in a hellish existence or so forth. And that is killing your father and mother of this life. I mean, we think of every sentient being, we think they've all been my mother, and but it's literally of this life. And Arya being, which is a being who has a direct realization of reality, perceptual realization. And how do we know who that is? Because nobody ever tells you they have that. It says drawing blood from a Buddha rather than killing a Buddha, because you can't actually kill a Buddha. Think about that. I mean, we're talking about all the security, just the other day, all the security around, for example, the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama in India is like the second most important person in terms of security. The Prime Minister's first, and then the Dalai Lama second, because nobody in India wants the Dalai Lama to be killed on their watch, right? And you could say the physical body can be killed, but that mind continues on. So the actual Buddha mind just takes another form somewhere else. So that's why we say that. So just to get that understanding, can't actually kill a Buddha. And the other one that is of immediate retribution is causing a split amongst the Sangha. So ordained, you know, turning, you know, this is why we say we never criticize an other Buddhist tradition, right? Because it's all the teachings of the Buddha, and the Buddha taught according to the capacity. And then we will look at a bit more closely at the 3 scopes. Then it's all valid. It's all teachings of the Buddha. So we don't criticize other ones. Of course, if people are going off track, that's a different matter. We're not talking about that. Even at the Buddha's time, there were those people, and the Buddha, you know. Anyway, so compassionately, we do what we can. You know, we've been born at a time where there are pure followers of the Buddha's teachings. So that, and we're very fortunate to have met those teachings, those teachers, whether we say met online or met in person, you know, then we have, you know, that great fortune to have met an authentic tradition that we can trace back all the way to the Buddha, because the lineage is always traced back. This is why it's just like, as we talked last time, that whole presentation that is in Liberation, the Palm of Your Hand, that shows all the lineages, all the Lamrim lineages, all this lineage, that lineage, and shows you all those people whose names probably don't mean so much to you yet, or they might, some of them might, but that we can say, oh, and that one got from that one, and they got from that one, and it's all an old tradition that came back from the Buddha. And we get transmissions from those teachings, which means when we ourselves progress on the path to a certain point, everything we've received, we're able to remember. I'm looking forward to that. Remember, and then we generate realizations of that. So we're in that fortunate eon, and we're, you know, genuine practitioners can enjoy support. So here we have the support of the Dharma Center, or we see the support for people going into long retreat or so forth and so forth. So there is support. Okay. So this, you know, we reflect on this, how very precious it is, you know, because we say, you know, I even just love the reflection of, isn't it so wonderful I woke up today in the same body, you know, because we don't think about that it could have been a different situation. But just to realize how precious that is, how I've still got the karma, as we say, to be able to continue on creating virtue, creating goodness, working on my mind and so forth. You know, it's amazing, even as much or as little as I do in any one day, but I've still got the opportunity, still got the breath, you know, which comes later as well. Okay, so by having this, you know, cultivating this appreciation for having all the conditions coming together, we also have to realize that they don't come together easily, right? Different analogies are used. So when there was a film, it was one of the Dalai Lama in Australia had a fundraiser for at a cinema for, you know, for the tour of one of the tours of His Holiness. And they showed a film called In the Cave of the Yellow Dog. And it's about a young girl's relationship with her dog. I don't know if anyone's seen this film. It's in Tibet. And anyway, so at one point, her grandfather, who's like the teacher, has a needle, like a sewing needle, and grains of rice. And so the sewing needle is pointing up, and he's just showering down on it grains of rice. And he's saying the likelihood of one grain of rice sticking to the point of the needle, that's how rare this precious human rebirth, not an ordinary human rebirth, having all of these conditions and having an interest from our side. I didn't say that one, did I? We've got to have the interest from our side, having faith in the Dharma from our side. So this is how rare it is. You know, there are different analogies used traditionally and so forth, but I really like that because, you know, he's totally demonstrating it, and not one grain sticks to the tip of the needle. And this is to counteract our idea of taking for granted that, oh, that's okay, I've got this life, and then I'll just continue on in another human life. And well, we have to create the conditions for that. So the conditions of all of this coming together, the main ones of all of this coming together, and appreciating that the Buddha said only a Buddha knows karma, he said that to Ananda, is that, you know, in past lives, we've practiced pure ethics. And this is part of the, you know, when we look at the three scopes, it's the first step, if you like, practicing pure ethics of no harm, at least abstaining from harm is the minimum. With our speech, with our actions, even with our mind, you know, ourselves or others, no harm. So we've done that, and usually it's referred to in the context of having also taken vows, because whatever level of vows you take, I love it. Even you're fast asleep, you're accumulating more and more merits. We talk about the merits. We're accumulating more and more of that, even we're fast asleep, living, abiding in vows. So it's quite powerful. It like transforms our mind stream. So that's one. And then practice of generosity, which we mention in that Refuge and Bodhichitta prayer, you know, the practice of generosity and so forth, other perfections that comes along later. But the practice of generosity, which is a pure generosity, is not giving everything away. It's the wish to give, that wish to, you know, be able to offer, to give, and so forth, being willing to, you know, if we can, and so forth. And there's whole elaborate teachings around that. So those two, plus having made stainless prayers in past lives to attain this precious human rebirth, you know. So we could say, you know, last time when we were human, so often in our prayers it says, when again born human. So here we are, again born human, And that has all ripened for us. We've made those pure stainless prayers in past lives, just as well, you know, we continue to do, you know, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. And, you know, saying that as purely as possible. And now we have an opportunity over these next few months to say it frequently and hold Lama Zopa Rinpoche in our hearts. So all of these conditions coming together is not, it's not by chance, and it's taken a lot of effort on our side in past lives. Right? So we continue on that effort. So in brief, Shanti Davis said, relying upon the boat of a human body, free yourself from the great river of pain, all forms of suffering, as it is hard to find this boat again. This is no time for sleep, you fool. Wake up. I mean, being a Buddha is being that, fully awake, right? So saying, wake up. So these are the prerequisites then that we have for even engaging in this whole path to enlightenment. So there's a lot before we even, you know, come to the point of engaging in this. And here, if you do have this sheet, or you refer to later, we have these, it's laid out as 3 scopes. The Buddha knew the scope or the capacity or the ability right now of each and every, well, we could say sentient being, but in terms of the Lamrim teachings would be of the human having the appreciation of this human life, having all these conditions coming together and wanting to make meaning and use it in more meaningful ways than just the affairs of this life. So we also talk about the 8 worldly concerns of this life, which is, you know, being caught up with reputation. You know, I've got to have a good reputation and freak out if anyone says anything bad about me, not wanting to be blamed and wanting to be praised. Look at how much our minds do that. And using this life to accumulate stuff, to gain property and prestige and power and so forth, and freaking out when we're separated from that. And also just wanting to have the pleasures of life, right? And not bearing to encounter any displeasure. And yet it's through that we grow. So these are the traps, and these are the things we want to be free of. So these are the preconditions, in a way, for seriously engaging in a spiritual path. Okay, so then looking at, first of all, looking at these 3 scopes, 3 capacities. And the first one of that, the small scope, is to strive to use this life in, you know, subsequent lives to create the best conditions to indeed have another precious human rebirth, appreciating all of these conditions, and, you know, may I continue on birth to birth. I know for myself, I always think it took me so long to ordain in this life. You know, I always have this, may I, you know, ordain in all future lives, which requires being born human. May I take, and swiftly, like as soon as possible, you know. So that's an aspiration. It's a pure aspiration, whether or not it occurs exactly like that. My aspiration being that, you know, so I can continue on. So this level of practice is saying, you know, may I, if I'm even looking at a good rebirth, okay, we might want to go to, you know, God realms and sit there in blissful, you know, 999 years and so forth, and fritter away all our good karma. We might. Or we say to have a precious human rebirth again and again, you know, and be able to continue on the path. So it's looking towards future lifetimes still within samsara, still within this cycle of existence wherever we get reborn. So that's the initial or minimum level of aspirational goal for our practice, so-called this initial scope. And we'll go on in subsequent weeks to look at the intermediate scope or middling scope, which is that you want to be free of this, please, I don't want any more suffering at all. I want to be free of all that altogether, and striving for liberation or definite goodness is sometimes said. And one of the teachings that I just love the translation of, as soon as I heard there was going to be a teaching on this, I was on a plane from Sydney to Queensland to get the teaching, and it was Lama Tsongkhapa's Verses to Incite Weariness with Cyclic Existence, or disenchantment, or have you had enough of going around and around and around? And I was listening to someone this morning who was describing this. She's actually a Hindu nun, but she was describing this, what I related to like this. It's like, you know, we build up cobwebs and dust and stuff, and then clean it away, and then it builds up again, and then we clean it away. We're still stuck in that, you know, lifetime after lifetime. And wanting to be free of all of that. So the practice is in relation to that. So that's huge in relation to the initial scope, the lower scope. And then the great scope says, well, that's all very well for myself to be free of all that, but what about everyone else, all the other beings? And so then wanting to become a Buddha, as we say in our Refuge and Bodhichitta prayer. So as we go along, these things gain more meaning, and I guess a bit more, you know, understanding of, well, that's all very well to say, but how do I go about doing that? How do I go about achieving that? So here, so there were some questions from last week. So the freedoms and opportunities we possess now. So we've gone through those. In what way is this human life especially rare and precious? And then for ourselves, a reflection, what can I achieve in this life? And as we go through, it's just like, what can I, you know, set as my goal in this life as an achievement from this life? You know, we have this presentation, but even more specific, we can get in ourselves, in our minds, about what can I specifically achieve in this life? I think it's very useful to set our own goals. Well, we set goals for everything, isn't it? Because how do you know you achieve the goal? Or how do you even know if where you're going? You know, it says a path to enlightenment, and we have to sort of know where's the path going, you know, otherwise we're rudderless or without a map and we don't know where we're going. We need Google Maps, you know, to enlightenment. It'd be nice, wouldn't it? Nice app. The Google Map to enlightenment. Get working on it, someone. Okay. So yeah, that's good to reflect on. So we're talking about these different stages as being a graduated method to gradually expand the scope. So I like the scope of thinking of it as the scope of a camera lens, expanding out, encompassing more and more and more as we progress one step. You know, based on our motivation for happiness. And like the analogy used of like the tree, as it grows and grows and grows, it offers more and more shade, more and more protection, more and more respite, you know, and it gets taller and spreads wider and reaches more. We can think of beings or so forth. So this initial scope or small scope, or sometimes it says beings of lower capacity, and it sounds like people are stupid, but it doesn't mean that at all. It just means right now, this is more than I can handle. Thank you very much. It's huge already, because already it's beyond what most people are caught up in. There's just ordinary everyday existence and so forth by whatever circumstances, but just focusing on this life and keeping it as comfortable as possible, making it as comfortable as possible. I mean, when I went to buy a mattress for my mother, you know, she was coming towards the end of her life, but the nurses, carers said, oh, she really needs a new mattress. Of course, she didn't want a new mattress. So it ended up being my new mattress, but she said, oh no, you need that. Anyway, somebody else has got it now. Well, they've probably thrown it out by now. I was so freaked out. I mean, it used to be simple, just go and buy a mattress. Now it's got all these layers and it's got a topper and it's got a this and a that and whatever, whatever. It's just like, where do you start? I mean, just a simple mattress is fine. Because we're caught up with the comforts of this life and because we can, you know. But if that's all we do, I mean, nothing wrong with being comfortable, go for it. Get a good night's sleep and your meditation will be better. But if it's only for that, then that's the problem. Okay. So this is giving up attachment. So this level of practice is giving up attachment for this life. And then we can investigate the things we're attached to and feel that's already pretty tough, you know, particular foods we like or touch or anything on the basis of the senses. So possessions. So it's not it's not about, you know, everyone giving everything away and becoming a, I think in the, I was thinking in the, when I was growing up in the Catholic faith, there was sort of like the ones who wore hair shirts or something, you know, and things like that to make their life really uncomfortable. That's not in our tradition, okay. That's a relief. It's not about that. But to see what is it I can accomplish, you know, set the goals for our spiritual progress this life right now. And check up as we go along how we're doing. So the typical, just to go through, not in a lot of deep detail, the typical reflections that we do, the topics that we reflect on in this. So death, the suffering of lower realms, refuge, karma. And we talk about death and impermanence, that's the start, because we have to remind ourselves, I mean, we know intellectually we're going to die. I was having a conversation with some friends of different faiths this week, and they're saying, is it true Buddhists talk about death a lot? And I, oh, yes, we talk. You reflect on it every day? Oh, yeah. Yeah, death and suffering, and people say, oh, you're a morbid light, you're all in death and suffering. It's facing the reality of existence, so that at a time of death, that we don't totally freak out about, oh, now I'm going to die. I mean, should we even have that presence of mind? So we contemplate that. And this is contemplating a coarse level of impermanence. It's self-evident to us. Of course, we know we're going to die. As you know, I don't think anybody's going to question that. The single cause of death is what? Being born. Quite simply, being born. So, you know, we have another module, of course, coming along, the one after the next one, on going into this in more detail, but, you know, gaining that, just to have the presence of mind, as Lama Yeshe used to say, you know, if you sort of treat each day like it's your last day on earth. I mean, many people say this anyway, you know, you would, and as a Dharma practitioner, what would you do with that last day on earth, you know? And so that then you'd engage in practice. It's to encourage us in that direction, because we don't know when that's going to happen. We don't know. And how prepared am I to face that time of death? Have I finished unfinished business, you know? And have I got regrets? I'm going to be holding on to things or people or so forth at the time of death, stuff of this life, you know? So we use various contemplations of that, and to realize that none of the stuff of this life is going to benefit us. And so then we do meditations on that, on these different points of contemplating death, but also, and it's very useful to do, on subtle impermanence, So even beyond the fact that we're all going to die, I mean, that's self-evident, and we can meditate on that and familiarize with that, so that, as Milarepa said, you know, I went to the cave and I contemplated death over and over again. And was left with no fear of death. So we do want to have that. We want to end up with no fear of death, which indeed my mother said, you know, that she had no fear of death at the time of death because she had a couple of near-death experiences and they were blissful. And so she had no fear. She just said, oh, just another step in the spiritual journey, I thought. So my non-Buddhist mum sounds more Buddhist than me. That happened a lot. So we contemplate that, and the subtle impermanence. I was going to do a meditation here, but I'm not sure. But we will be doing these meditations, because we do meditations on each of the scopes to familiarize. But it's also very interesting to do one on impermanence, and just, you know, even just contemplating as you go about the day of, oh, I remember in Sydney thinking I'd be on the bus on the way to work and going, in 100 years' time, that shop won't be there. Well, it didn't take 100 years. It was took about 5. But to think along those lines, none of us will be here or whatever, you know. So just to keep that contemplation just at a very, I was going to say practical level, even at a superficial level is okay, you know, the coarse level of just, you know, oh, that's interesting. This, you know, things will change, you know. We see it with seasons, everything. But also, as the Buddha said, you know, the subtle level is the moment by moment change that we don't see. You know, that everything's changing. Myself, the table, the vase, everything. We don't see or experience that subtle level, but we know it because today the scientists can show it to us, you know, that everything's in a state of flux. And that sort of helps us let go of this grasping at things to be solid, reliable, stable, unchanging, and so forth. It just sort of it helps us let go. I mean, it's not magic. We train our mind again and again. So by meditating on that subtle level of impermanence, and particularly when we start to apply it to our body, I mean, as we age, it's very self-evident that nothing stays the same, and it's getting more and more impermanent, or the experience of it is the impermanence of the body as you get older. But also as a meditation, you know, Lama Zopa Rinpoche at the Lamp of the Path, the last one I think that was held in North Carolina, the teachings Rinpoche has been doing over 10 years that hasn't opened a teacher's text yet. But we've got a lot of teachings in the meantime. So Rinpoche led us on meditation. So you can imagine how excited, you know, a couple of hundred people are. Oh, Rinpoche is leading me on a walking meditation, going up the hill, bringing all these beings up to the higher realms. And we were very joyful. And then Rinpoche said, and now as you go down, each step, think one step closer to death. I mean, you just didn't want to walk. You're just like, oh, I've got to think one step closer to death, one breath closer to death. I know some people who have that on their tagline on, used to be on Skype, I don't know where they put it now. One breath closer to death, one breath closer to death, one step closer to death. Just reminding ourselves of that, not to be gruesome, not to cultivate fear, yes, but wholesome fear, such that at the time of death, we won't have that fear of, oh, I've just been wasting all these precious opportunities I've just been reflecting on, and check up what's the state of my mind. How's that going to be if I die right now? You know, so just to check up and help us and encourage us, like a teacher, you know, to enthuse us, inspire us to practice. And not beat ourselves up when we don't. It's just like, yeah, but. So rejoice in what we do. So this whole set of contemplations about death and impermanence, and, you know, realizing that at the time of death, even the body, we've got to relinquish. I think that's the hardest thing. We've got to leave the body behind. But even the very coarse manifest level of our mind we leave behind. It's only a very subtle level that goes life to life. So whatever imprints, you know, of virtue we can place on that very subtle level of mind, so that gets stronger and stronger and stronger. as we go this life to the next. So as I said, there's a whole other module on that, so we can elaborate on that later. And so then we have a whole series of contemplations as well on rebirth in the lower realms as an animal, as a hungry ghost, as a hell being. And it's said that, you know, the hatred, anger, the mind of revenge and so forth is the cause for a hellish existence. Again, not thinking that it's a place, hell, although we do have 20 of those, or descriptions of 20 of those, you know, 8 hot hells, 8 cold hells, and then 4 neighboring hells and so forth that aren't as quite as bad as the other 2, and they just get more and more extreme. So when we get to samsara and nirvana module way down the track, we'll look at more detail in that. Although Lama Zopa Rinpoche at the very, you know, first Copan courses, the month-long courses, he'd be doing that for weeks on end, and people were just about to leave, and Lama, yes, you'd have to come in and buoy them up. It's just like, I didn't come here to hear about intense suffering. I've got enough of my own. But that's the point. So in that existence, you're just full of suffering. You just can't, you know, everything is suffering. So there's no way you're going to be practicing Dharma. There's no way that you're going to be, you know, sitting there watching your breath. It's just like everything, you know, you're just think what it's like when we have an illness, how hard it is to even focus your mind, let alone do any practice, even think of doing any practice. So intensify that. And that's that hellish existence, or one of fear, you know, total fear. And, you know, being reborn in a hungry ghost realm, constant craving, you know, attachment, desire energy. So this is where it's really good to look at, oh, what is my desire energy? What are the things I crave and grasp at and think they're going to cause me happiness? And they do for a short time, but not lasting. It's not to say don't enjoy those things while you have it, but don't hold them as, you know, the source of all my happiness. Like a friend of mine many years ago, a couple, and they were both had very well-paid jobs. And they were living in an apartment, very nice apartment in Sydney. They already bought one other apartment for the kids. And even though they never went sailing, they were contemplating getting a yacht or something because they wanted to keep their tax bracket down. I was just like, wow, what an awful dilemma to have, truly. You know, just like, what else can I do? Craving, grasping. And ending up in this existence where you're never satisfied. You can see it's a magnification of that existence of craving, of that mind of craving. You know, you're never satisfied. And then you get that, and then you want more, bigger, better, whatever. Okay. And then, so, yeah, and then the mind of ignorance of wrong views, it says karma, oh, it doesn't matter, you know, just enjoy, or dismissing what is a law of cause and effect, you know, is that you end up reborn as an animal, you know, overwhelmed again by confusion, driven by instincts, not able to work on your mind, and we could say living in fear. And these contemplations on, oh, if that's the alternative, I don't want to go there, is the whole point of those contemplations. Then that becomes a cause for turning for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, by, you know, taking refuge, for seeking for some refuge from the possibility, a possible scenario of living in any of those existences. Yes. Don't be sorry.
You just need to talk about the gentleman who got by bus to kind of.
The gentleman who got hit by a bus.
Yes, you had been to the London tea teaching.
Oh yes, the one who got hit by a bus and died. Yes, at the end of the Lamb Rim teachings.
I
Yes.
was terrified after that. I thought, oh my God, my thoughts are so destructive. What if I get hit by thoughts now? I used to thoughts all the time. It's terrifying.
It is terrifying right now to think, what if I get hit by a bus? But you have to interrogate, why is it terrifying? Is it terrifying because I feel like I'm not prepared? Probably yes is the answer to that. I'm not ready yet. I haven't done what I need to do or want to do. And so then if we're living each day to, the best we can, at least taking steps in the right direction, the idea is that then our mind can be more peaceful about that. But also by familiarizing with the fact that, oh, that's true. I could be hit by a bus, anything, And I can't say what state of mind he was in at the time of death, but I'm just hoping that he'd done a year on Lam Rim. He was going back to do more, and there he was, immersed in this whole retreat, and then gone, So, but this is a good reflection, reading the news and seeing, oh, how many people have died without expecting to die. I mean, most people die without expecting to die, or maybe they don't. I mean, if you're older or you've got a debilitating illness and so forth, then okay, maybe you could say, yeah, well, I know that I've been told I've only got so long to live, or even they don't tell people that these days because they're so often wrong. Karma takes care. But we can, any one of us, any time. So to turn that fear into a wholesome fear, that terror into a wholesome fear, it's like, it's true, I could die at any time. So what do I need to prepare? But not, I need to prepare everything right now in this second, okay? Because then you'll just be overwhelmed by that, right? But okay, yeah, well, I could make some steps in the right direction. So don't die with a mind of regret. Don't die with not being prepared or not feeling prepared. And at the very least, being able to have the presence of mind. I pray for this, to be able to call to mind the Buddha or the Guru or Refuge, even the thought of that. Yeah, it's very interesting. You can see how prepared we are. Like when I wasn't dying, I don't think I could have been, ended up in hospital, suddenly with pneumonia and so forth. And Chodron Rinpoche was at the center and I was feeling poor me. It took me some hours to think, oh, perhaps I could get some advice for spiritual practice. It's a bit scary because what if you did die in that time? I was in the poor me phase, not in the, oh, perhaps I could focus on spiritual practice. Of course, once I had that instruction, that kept me going for the rest of the time. But it was just like, oh, there's a bit of a gap there. I'm not quite ready, to say the least. So, yeah, we use it to create then our cause, for wanting to take refuge, for wanting that protection and so forth. Of course, I'm going to say that's another module further down the track as well. However, this is all part of the lower scope, the intentional scope, the small scope, of a reflection on that, of, okay, what's my alternatives for where I could be born? Seeing I'm going to die any old time, and then turning for refuge. So we investigate, we say the refuge and bodhicitta prayer, and I appreciate that it comes from Lama Atisha, and that keeps it very dear to me in my heart and so forth. But then what does it mean to go for refuge? And, contemplating the qualities and capacities of the Buddha's teachings, which is the real refuge, and the Arya Sangha, those beings who have attained those realizations, who, thank you very much, have been teaching, do teach, make the Buddha's teachings accessible, and through the role models of their life show that this is possible. And I was just rewatching that film of about Thich Nhat Hanh's life, A Cloud Never Dies, and seeing what not only what he did with his life, but how many people, oh, well, I wouldn't know how many people, but, you know, the vast influence that he had. And you see, I see, there is a being who, there are these beings in the world who make the use of adversity to then transform their minds. And as he said, to overcome the trauma, the suffering, to heal from trauma, you know, and his whole practice based on that is very, very powerful, profound. And then going for refuge. And, you know, having an understanding, at least a working basis of karma, another module further down the track, karma, that the law of cause and effect, that, you know, by engaging in wholesome actions, by engaging in virtues. So here we bring in the refraining from the 10 non-virtues. And it says 10, but there's a whole lot more. I could think we could think of a hell of a lot, right? But in summary of, you know, not killing, not taking the life of others, refraining from taking life with intent, you know. We go through this with the karma module, as I said, in greater detail, so that we deliberately at least do no harm. And then they say on top of that, if you can be of benefit, if you can save lives, well, that's an added bonus, but at least which is engaging in virtuous acts, benefiting others rather than taking life. Not stealing or not taking what is not given, a little bit more subtle than not stealing, not taking what is not given. It's not mine. It overcomes that mind of grasping and, you know, miserliness and so forth. And then the virtuous side of that would be giving, the practice of generosity and so forth. Generosity with material possessions or medicines or so forth, if we have that to give. Freedom from fear, which we give to our precious animals, but to, you know, those are parents or grandparents or whatever we give to children or those who need protection. Giving the Dharma, you know, the free books in whatever way that we can. It's the most precious way. And giving love. I mean, yes, practice of giving love. It's profound in life. So like that. So so that was not stealing, not lying. At least being very careful with our speech. That it's like, oh, I've got to go back to one more in the sort of body, but the one of speech, of not trying to deceive people, others with your speech, because any attempt of us to deceive others is based on us, a self-motivation, self-centered motivation. It's not in the interests of others. Of course, there are skillful means of lying when it is to save others, like with, no, that was the killing one, when the Buddha, out of his clairvoyance on a ship, you know, and he could see that the captain was going to kill the 500 crew. It's been a massive ship. And I think about, I don't know how many crew are on those big sea liners, but anyway, it says there were 500 people on the boat. And the Buddha, out of his clairvoyance, could see that this captain was, you know, planning to kill everyone, not quite sure by what means. Instead killed the captain. It saved the captain from that act of killing, that non-virtue of killing, but also saved the lives of all those beings, right? And of course, in a court of law, that wouldn't stand up, just saying. You would still go to prison. But the Buddha, being the Buddha, would be happily go to prison to have, you know, sort of focused on future lives rather than on that life, to be able to say, okay, I'll do this for the greater good, you know. Of course, the Buddha's in a different category to us, but what is possible, you know, we can plant the seeds for that. And so, yes, I said about lying, I might as well continue on with the 4 of the speech. So lying, not using divisive speech, turning people against each other, you know, what do we say, backbiting or, you know, behind their back. saying nasty things. I mean, it's bad enough saying nasty things towards a person, but even worse, behind their back. And then you're creating division as well, you know, disharmony. And these are, I think the things of speech are so easy to engage in, more so than, you know, we don't go around intentionally killing beings, although, of course, we do every day kill them, but not with the intention. Anyway, we'll elaborate more when we get to the karma module. So the, divisive speech. So refraining from that, and where we can, using our speech to bring people together, to bring harmony. And when I look at someone like His Holiness Dalai Lama in the world, very skillful way of, no matter who he engages with, to be very respectful and to connect people and bring them together, harmonious speech. Not slandering people, libel, so forth. And not idle chitter chatter. This is the hardest one. We all do idle chitter chatter, but we can do idle chitter chatter if our reason is to connect with people, to bring people together, to be harmonious, to be offering love, to be offering an ear, or so forth. No problem, idle chitter chatter. I found when I was working, you know, in the lay life, it's just like, well, when you go to work, you have to sort of engage in that. Otherwise, people think you're a snob or you're disinterested, right? If you don't just engage in the blah, blah, blah of the workplace, sort of, right? So, but with intentionality. And so your intention can still be, because I value this person, I want to connect with them and so forth. And if I can slip a few beneficial things in there, meaningful things, which is the opposite of the idle chitter chatter, I will, but not to be, I'm not going to say something very meaningful. We have to be very skillful, right? And just, ethical in our speech. And so going back then, the sexual misconduct one is of not cheating on a partner that you're in a committed relationship, or with someone else that you know is in a committed relationship. Because why? Everyone gets hurt. No matter what we tell ourselves or each other, everyone gets hurt. So it always ends up badly, you know, and it makes headlines. And I'm just like, how many more headlines and how many more movies do we need about all this stuff? It just keeps happening again and again. I mean, haven't we got the message? Anyway, you know what I mean. And the opposite of that is being respectful of others' bodies, being respectful of other people, beings, any living being. Because why? Because each and every one is a potential Buddha, including ourselves. Okay. So I think I've covered the refraining from the 10 non-virtues and engaging in virtues very much in summary form as a practice, understanding karmic consequences, which we had reflecting on, well, what causes you to be born in lower realms and so forth. But also, as it says, not only that, but karma multiplies. So that if I leave it festering, some negative thought festering on my mind, you know, we know the experience of that just getting, you know, totally out of control, and it's so some, you know, anger totally hijacks your rational mind, and there's no more rationality, and it's all just crazy, ridiculous stuff. And if we don't watch that, it comes out in our actions. So small actions are not insignificant. On the positive side, very small positive actions are also multiply. Like when this young Tibetan girl, I keep telling the story, and I think every time I tell the story, it just brings joy to my heart. When we're standing outside the stupa, her family had visited the center, and standing outside the stupa, and they wanted me to join the photo. So I joined the photo, and this little girl brings the teeniest, tiniest flower and offered it to me. I wouldn't have seen that flower unless she, and it was so joyful. Lama Zopa Rinpoche has a teaching on that, of even the smallest flower. And I thought, that's it, she's got it. Even this, that presence of mind, that joy of seeing that beauty and sharing that. And see, now every time I talk about it, everyone else shares it as well. So definitely magnifies. So, you know, all our little steps that we make engaging in virtue you know, do multiply, and if we rejoice in that, it multiplies even more. Isn't that great? You know, I just told that story again. Fantastic. You know, we rejoice in that. We gain more. So, and also, whatever we experience in life, we don't experience all our experiences as a result of the karma that we have created, that actions that we have done that have left an imprint or a tendency or so forth, or have created causes out there in the world for us to experience the result. Just like, you know, Tibet under the 13th Dalai Lama. The 13th Dalai Lama warned the Tibetans that if they didn't clean up the act in the monasteries, I think there was places where they were turning them into businesses that it was sort of like lost their core Dharma purpose and was more about a business. I always think about, you know, Jesus in the temple with the thieves. I'm not sure if it was thieving, but anyway, that something unethical was happening. The Dalai Lama said, you know, if you don't clear up your act, you will suffer the karmic consequences of this. So Tibetans have this attitude with the situation in Tibet these days. It's just like we created that karma, right? It's not you sit back and just go, oh, well, nothing to do. Of course, you do what you can by peaceful means, but a recognition that, well, if I'm having that experience, I must have created the karma for that. So if I don't want to keep having those experiences, I want to create more virtuous karma so that I have more happy experiences, right? More virtuous experiences, because I'm in sync with reality, with things as they, I was going to say should be, but we quit the shoulds, right? Things as they actually are. Just watch the results. I mean, we do recognize it at a very coarse level, manifest level, we say, you know, that when we just think of the joy when we've been able to benefit someone else. And we haven't done it to get the joy, but the joy comes as a result, or we feel good about ourselves, right? So the more we do like that, the better we feel about ourselves, and the better we feel about ourselves, the more confidence that we have that we can do more, that we can better on. I'm getting good at this. You know? It's all training. So nothing that we do gets wasted. Nothing that we do gets wasted, even lifetimes in between. His Holiness says, if you can plan for the long term or the short term, always plan for the long term. And so even that might be short term difficulties and obstacles and so forth, and we're planning for the long term, and our intention is that stuff still happens, you know, obstacles still happens, difficulty happen, but we sort of, what do we say, grist for the mill, use it as grist for the mill. Okay. So these are the reflections and so forth, the meditations engaged in this initial scope of practice, and we sort of progress through one by one. And we have all sorts of points. Meditate on this point, meditate on that point, meditate on that point. As I said, just the one on impermanence, I think, you know, you meditate on that day after day after day after day, and just more things come to mind, more things come to mind. It's great, just thinking about the impermanence of anything whatsoever. Of course, we have structured meditations to do, but just, you know, keeping that mind that allows us to be more fluid, including the impermanence of our mind, so that when we're in those stuck places, even though it goes on longer than we would absolutely like it to happen, we can say it won't last forever. You know, we say this too will pass, you know, yeah, but when? But we can let go of that sense of stuckness, because we can, everything is subject to change. Our mind's changing moment by moment. We've done those meditations on the continuity of mind and really apply it practically to say, okay, it'll change, I can change it, you know, slowly, slowly. So this is what this initial scope practice is, to not just get caught up in everyday affairs. Of course, we engage in everyday affairs. That would be, unless we're going to go off into some retreat somewhere, we have to engage with others day to day, in the workplace, in the family, in our transactions in life and so forth, and use that as an opportunity for our spiritual growth, because we're striving for a good rebirth next time. So, you know, this you know, you can see there's already a lot involved. It's not like, oh, those lower scope beings, oh, I'm following the Mahayana path, I'm up at the other end. Well, just check the mind. You can have that motivation and be engaging in all of these practices, you know. So questions, comments, points for discussion?
I had a question. How do you keep your motivation for practice up, especially when you're living in this world? Because sometimes I see my friends are they're having a good time, they're progressing in life, getting married, career progression, and then here I am, I just keep doing my practice.
Yeah.
And it sometimes gives this doubt, am I falling behind?
It's very, very challenging, isn't it? You know, to have the sense of we compare ourselves to others around us, and you might even think, maybe they're on the right track and maybe I'm on the wrong track. You know, maybe it is just all about this life. And this is the thing, it is so seductive, you know, in one way, so seductive. And this is why the Buddha says, you know, we see this suffering existence as a pleasure grove, as a, you know, or as, yes, I've got to get on in life. And maybe we do have to also get on in life, but what's my motivation for getting on in life? Like, hey, look, if you can make a lot of money and that goes to Dharma projects or to whatever, like many Dharma practitioners have done and set up foundations and benefited the world, but it's a challenge, you know? It's a challenge. So we need to just, you know, sometimes, you know, of course we get enthusiastic about practice when we come to the Dharma Center and we get inspired and so forth. And just like, okay, I'll just start. And it's finding a balance that nothing is contradictory. We can practice Dharma in every moment of our life while you're engaging in that profession or whatever, as long as it's an ethical one and we're not doing something unethical. And, you know, use that as our means. You know, that I think when we do the Tara Puja, there's one, you know, we've got these praises, the 21 praises, you know, to the Taras, 21 different verses. And I can't remember the whole story, but one practitioner said, I couldn't possibly do all of that. I've got, you know, I think it was a king, you know, I've got to run a country. And so the Buddha's like, okay, we'll just do these 4 lines. It condenses it all. So there are, you know, sort of more condensed methods. But it is about, we need like our Dharma brothers, sisters to encourage us. And so this is, you know, we, you know, by reflecting on this, on the sort of graduated path to enlightenment, so that we are enthused, so that we are inspired to practice, so that, you know, we maybe, you know, make sure, okay, I'll do a bit of reading every day. I'll do 10 minutes of reading from the Lam Rim. That's perfect. Or the Lam Rim year. I'll do one of those. I'll read through that reflection every day and just contemplate that. And, you know, it's like we have to reset, maybe often throughout the day, our motivation, you know, throughout the day. And when, as particularly when we notice it waning, which is maybe often, you know. But I think sometimes why it wanes is that we set ourselves too high a standard for where we think I should be right now. You know, you read all these amazing stories and you think, I'm nowhere near any of that. And just like slowly, slowly, slowly chipping away, as long as I'm taking a step in the right direction each day. I mean, it's like people with families, they still have family commitments. They've got to do all of those things. But it's more like, okay, how can I integrate that in the how I do rather than the what I do? So it's not for everybody to go off and, well, even ordaining doesn't mean that you're leaving a lot of stuff behind, you know. In fact, I found it very interesting. It was sort of like it gave me more freedom and more purpose to connect with my family. It's interesting, right? So, yeah, so we just, we've got to, it's like we've got to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and we'll just do a little bit. I'll just do a little bit. I'll just do a little bit. And those little bits add up. And see, has this made me, as the Buddha said, check up? Is more contentment, more peace, more equanimity, more love, more compassion, more, are these things, can I feel that more in my life or not?
Maybe from my experience.
Sure.
It's you're not going to have motivation.
You look what, sorry?
Not going to get motivation all the time.
You're not going to get motivated all the time.
It's going to be like these dry patches.
Yes, there are dry patches.
For me, this is true at the moment, so I just sit down and think,
Just do it, in other words, just do it. Okay.
I know my concentration is going to be terrible before I even begin, but I just say, oh, I sit. And 10 minutes later, because you've been practicing, I think if you expect there to be lack of motivation at times, it's kind of easier when it's Look, there's going to be, like, we're in here for the long haul, and sometimes it will be the dry patches. You might even say, well, actually a lot of the time it's the dry patches and there's just occasional highlights in all of that, but I keep doing it. And with meditation too, as you're saying, that sometimes it's just like, well, I've got no concentration, but check up, is my day still the better for it? I have found the answer to be yes. Even when I think, well, sit there in meditation and go, well, I was all over the shop and that was a waste of time. I know it wasn't, because my experience of the day tells me differently. So putting the effort in has benefits. And just think that the Buddha's smiling all the time, smiling on your practice. Smile back. Why not? Okay, so we'll leave it there for today. And we'll do a brief dedication. Before that, maybe just to say, we do have Guru Puja on Wednesday, 7:30. We'll continue. Please continue anyway to do the refuge prayer, just whenever you think about it. Now it's sort of suddenly like, oh, I've got that time, and now I've got an extra motivation because I'm doing it for the health of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and so I've got an extra motivation to do. So that really helps me. And so, 10 minutes, I can do that, here and there, pep of the day, those moments. Actually, there's quite a lot more time than that. Rather than say, oh, I've got to do hours on end. It's just like, okay, I'll do one mala. Oh, look, I might do another one. Just let it grow. Okay. I go for refuge and, oh no, we did that at the beginning. Sorry. We want the one at the end, dedication. Page 16, if you have the book. Through the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the precious body mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Thank you very much. See you next Sunday, if not before.